Hey friends, if you've been watching my recent videos, you might have seen that I have a new guitar. Some of you in the comments pointed that out. Yes, this is my new guitar by Luthier Brianitzkinguitars, who's actually joining me today in my first ever YouTube interview. So in today's video, we're going to talk about the instrument with the luthier himself. What type of woods are there on the instrument? What was the building process like? Who is Torres, the famous luthier that it was modeled after? And much, much more. So let's get right into it. Hey Brian, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks. I'm just loving your new guitar over here.
I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, very much. So I just had some questions for you that I thought might be interesting for my YouTube audience here. First, I was wondering, who is Torres?
So Torres is the father of the modern classical guitar. He was born in, I think, 1812 or so in Almeria, Spain. Died in 1892. Throughout his lifetime, he essentially codified the modern guitar, took influences throughout Spain and Europe, put them all together to create something new that's still recognizable as the modern guitar as we know it today.
Very cool. And of course, this is a homage to Torres, right? This is not a exact replica.
Yeah, so the guitar this one is based on is FE13 as cataloged by Jose Romanillos in his book on Torres. That guitar was built in 1860, had Brazilian rosewood back and sides. This one has bird's eye maple. And then there's a few minor construction differences as well. And then also, I don't have Torres's hands, so I can't build a Torres copy.
Well, you know, that's actually a really cool thing that I learned about. When I went to Spain to get my Baroque guitar by Julio Castaños, I was listening to a conversation between him and one of his mentors. We were all having dinner, and he was talking about the idea that, in fact, it can be a mistake to build exact replicas. But one thing he was pointing out was even if you tried to make an exact replica, because of your own hands and building process, it's going to sound different. It's not going to be exactly the same result, even if you had the same woods, which we don't.
Exactly. There's a great quote attributed to Torres as well, where one of his friends, a priest who was helping him in the workshop and with the later part of his life, they were all having dinner where another person asked Torres, how come you don't teach other people your secrets? To which Torres replied, sorry to hear a man of your intellect falls victim to this. I can't pass it down because my knowledge is confined to the tips of my fingers, communicating to my intellect. So it's all just how a person works with the wood, their intuition and understanding of the materials.
That makes perfect sense to me. And it's a beautiful thing because it's part of what gives the final result its unique beauty is knowing that this is one of a kind.
Well, even consecutive slices of wood from the same tree will be different as well. So there really is no such thing as two identical guitars.
Well, I think it's clear that we both really love these Torres-style guitars.
Well, it's more of an obsession at this point. I even have the Torres headstock tattooed on my forearm.
No way. We gotta get a close-up of that.
All right.
Look at that. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. Okay. You're all in.
Yeah. Torres is a bit of a problem for me. I can quit anytime I want.
Yeah. Right. So tell us about the instrument. The woods you chose. How long did it take you to build? Where did you build it?
Sure. So the guitar is made of Swiss alpine spruce for the top. The back and sides are European bird's eye maple from Italy.
Yeah, I love the bird's eye maple. Isn't it the most beautiful thing?
I like to think so.
I love it. We have a little bit of this in my kitchen, and on a lot of 19th century guitars, which of course this is an homage to a 19th century guitar. The bird's eye maple seems to be a nice, common choice, and it's called that because of these little, beautiful, kind of eye-like spots there on the wood. I think it's so beautiful and adds sort of a clarity and brightness to the sound.
For the rest of the materials, the neck is Spanish cedar, which is neither cedar nor Spanish. It's a mahogany family wood that comes from South America.
That's funny.
The fretboard bindings are ebony, headplate, and bridge are Madagascan rosewood.
Sorry, wait.
It's fairly standard choices.
That's here. This is Madagascar.
Yeah, the veneer on the headstock.
Gotcha. So this cap piece of wood on the top. Gotcha. Cool.
And then the tuners are by Chris Barnett in Berlin, and just wanted to give him a shout out.
Those are incredible. These are the best tuners I've ever felt. You were mentioning to me that in advance, before Brian sent me this, he was like, these tuners are out of this world. And I kind of thought, how good can tuners be? They just, come on, just churn. And I got them, and they're just unreal. They are buttery smooth and super beautiful to look at.
Like Chris is also an incredible luthier as well.
Oh, nice.
So he started making his own tuning machines just because he couldn't really find things he really liked. And they're maybe a little excessively engineered. But I'd recommend checking them out if you're looking for a new set.
What about the beautiful Rosette here?
Sure. So the Rosette is fairly in keeping with the original. I was able to find a shade of green veneer that was pretty much on point to the original from an Italian supplier. It's a herringbone central pattern in green and white, which is a green dyed poplar and then natural maple veneers that I've glued together and cut and glued back together and cut once again. And then it's surrounded by veneers in black dyed poplar, maple, and then more green dyed poplar, as well as quadralinos, which are the square motifs that go around the inside and outside, which are ebony and maple veneers.
Cool. Yeah, I really love it.
It differs from the original Torres, though, where Torres had the herringbone go in two different directions and meet centrally at the bottom of the sound hole, where on mine, I just have the herringbone going all in one direction.
Blasphemy, Brian. You'll never be forgiven for this.
So sorry. Forgive me.
And you built it in Spain, right?
I did. So I go to Spain about once a year. I've been going since I was maybe 20 years old. My mentor in Spain, Stephen Hill, runs a really great month-long guitar making course through the European Institute of Guitar Making. Highly recommend checking that out too. I took that course in 2016, and that's what led to me becoming a professional guitar maker. And then this past year, I was asked to assist Stephen. There's 2 teachers on the course. So after the month-long course concluded, where I taught 6 students how to make their own guitar in Spain, I had 2 months to myself, just a working holiday, sabbatical, whatever you'd like to call it, where I built this guitar among 3 or 4 others.
That's so cool. Do you think that the climate in which you build the instrument impacts the end result in some way?
Well, yes and no, where I kind of maintain the same climate artificially regardless of where my workshop is.
Through humidification?
Through humidity control and just climate control, temperature, humidity, things like that. But I think just your physical surrounding while you're working influences you in different ways than that too. Where, considering that I was 2 minutes from the beach and drinking beer and eating tapas while I made this, I was in a much different mind frame than when I'm here in New York.
Yeah, it probably took longer because you didn't want to get off the beach. Today's video is brought to you by Classical Guitar Pro. That's my brand new online classical guitar course, which is 6 hours, 53 videos. It's a whole curriculum designed to teach you what you would normally learn in the first 6 months to a year of classical guitar lessons. So if you want to learn classical guitar but are stuck, struggling reading music or struggling to learn the techniques, check out classicalguitar-pro.com to learn more. So Brian actually reached out to me and recommended that we collaborate. And he had the idea of building a Torres guitar. He saw that I was a Torres guitar lover and a lover of Targa's music, so we have that in common. Do you want to talk a little bit about that process? Because we spoke a lot about while you were building it, kind of the goals.
Sure. So when I build a guitar for someone, it's almost always a bespoke instrument. I sell through 1 or 2 dealers where those are just built to my own specs. But pretty much everything I try to tailor to the individual who will be receiving the guitar. So I try to get to know people as well as possible in this limited context, understand your playing style, things like that, and use all of that information to inform what I was doing. Where with this one, I was really trying to get on the 19th century bandwagon. Something that I was in Granada, but something that was fairly similar to what would have been made in Sevilla, like a few hours away 150 years ago.
That's so cool. So how did my feedback during the process actually change what you were going to do?
So just based on the way you described your approach to playing, the way you strike the strings, your right hand and left hand technique, I felt compelled to adapt to that as well. Or things like the neck shape, the height of the bridge, just to compensate for a slightly lower action that you requested.
That's one thing I did ask for him was the lowest action possible. That was maybe one of the most extreme challenges of this instrument, I imagine for you, was I asked for an action which was basically pushing the limits of what's possible. And I told Brian that I'm a very light player since I'm not going for that the loudest volume possible. I have a very light touch on the instrument, and I try to find the basically the border between buzz and beautiful sounds. And I mean, I can make any guitar buzz, if I push it hard enough or in the wrong way. But what you do is you find the buzz point, and then you learn to play just before it, and you acclimate your dynamic spectrum, which is still large, to that range. So I told Brian that I wanted like the lowest action possible, and you did it. This is super, super easy to play.
Yeah, and you also requested the lightest gauge strings possible, which made my job even harder.
That's true. I think that was one realization I had, is I went a little too far with thinking I could get away with light tension basses. So I haven't done it yet, but I think I'm going to put on some heavier tension bass strings, and I think that's going to balance things out really nicely.
When I first strung up the guitar, I was immediately disappointed, where I played one note and I was like, oh no, it's all buzzy. I spent hours trying to work the frets to the point where it was fairly acceptable.
Wow. It's a game of compromise, right? It's how you play, plus, easier it is to play, which means the lower the strings, essentially, the more likely you are to buzz. So if you want things to be as easy as possible, you're going to be buzzy all over the place. Then I've played other guitars. One guitar I played was more than my car, and the thing I couldn't play it because the strings were so high off the fretboard. I think to make it loud and impossible to buzz, essentially.
Well, I have the good fortune of, when I go to Spain, it's usually corresponding with the Andres Segovia International Guitar Competition, which happens to take place in the same village I'm in Spain. So I've had the good fortune to meet a lot of incredible top concert performing guitarists who play modern guitars, double tops, Smallmans, things like that. Whenever I see their guitars, the action is this high, incredibly high tension strings. Wow. It's not nearly impossible to make them buzz, but also incredibly difficult to play them.
It's kind of an amazing thing to me. I just can't relate to that mindset. But at the same time, I know these people are amazing musicians. I hear the result and their skill. So it's clearly possible. It's just that from my philosophy, I don't understand that approach, because I'm going for something just different. It's the historical approach, a lighter touch, low tension gut strings, sometimes no nails. It's kind of the opposite of the modern approach. But it's each player has to make these decisions for themselves. I'm not sure there's a right or a wrong. But for me, one thing I would encourage players to do is to push the limits of tension downward, and then to acclimate their touch. For example, if you're buzzing, just move an inch to the right with the same amount of pressure, and you can usually reduce that buzz. Or just find that point and then never go beyond it, and then lower your piano. So if your piano is extra soft, then let me find it again, the loudest sounds, I have to go to the bridge, whatever the loudest sound you can make is without a buzz. Now your piano is relative to that. So we don't need some type of objective loud sound. It's you teach the audience what loud means, what loud and soft means, but the second you make sound, and then you play within that little microcosm that you've created, and then you can be incredibly musical. So we're not trying to blow the hat off of anyone in the audience with our sound. I don't think. But yeah, what you were saying is fascinating about the process and adapting to the needs of each client.
And it's not just the way the guitar sounds too, it's subtle things like the way I shape the neck, depending on... With you, I had the good fortune of seeing a ton of videos of you playing, so I could try to adapt the neck shape to how I've seen you play.
And so what'd you do?
So I made it so it's fairly thin. It's about 20.5 millimeters thick at the first fret and about 22 at the ninth.
Okay.
So it's fairly thin, a bit thinner than average.
Yeah.
Then I changed the shape, so it's pretty much flat on the back, where it's like a very wide D shape of the neck.
Yeah.
So it allows for you to really plant your thumb on the back without having it ride up.
Yeah.
Something I've just noticed about your own playing, where it seems like you fairly always keep your thumb planted in the back, in the middle, I guess, proper technique.
Well, it depends on the context. I think in general we live here on average, but if you're on the first string, you're lower. If you're on the sixth string, you're higher. If you're playing a G major chord or some type of chord, sometimes your thumb will pop up over the neck. But the thing that doesn't work is this electric guitar technique, where we hang the thumb on top and then we kind of glue the index finger and knuckle to the side. Even with this nice neck you've made, this is too, I think, uncomfortable and restricting given the thickness of classical guitar necks, the kind of the width also. They're very, very wide compared to electric guitar, for example. Also,
I've noticed that technique seems to lend itself better to single note playing, like electric guitar solos, rather than classical guitar playing.
Exactly. Melodic playing is actually a good thing. I mean, for example, in oud, they put their thumb on top. And it's because they're playing, you know, this type of melodic playing where they don't need to grab full chords, and they're certainly not playing Bach. You know, I mean, the second you do something complicated where one voice has to move down while one moves up, this type of spider fingers Bach thing of counterpoint where the bass line's moving this way and the upper part's moving that way, your fingers need to be in the most efficient places, which, as you can see here, if my fingers are all ready to play, it means that the thumb's in the back of the neck. So your neck shape, for me, is really ideal. We'll get back to the video in just a second, but first I wanted to mention these really cool headphones I'm wearing in today's interview. These are Mesa Audio 99 Classics. Super lightweight, fantastic clear sound. I use them for mixing my YouTube videos and have been loving them for the last 2 years. I just got these 109 Pros by Mesa Audio and they're even better. So I'd highly recommend you check out Mesa Audio if you're looking for a really great set of headphones for listening or even for mixing. Check out their link in the description and let's get back to the interview. Let's talk about the sound. For me, I was super excited to get this instrument and hear how it sounded, especially after all of our conversations that we had during the building process about your philosophy, the whole idea behind Torres guitars, our mutual love for Torres and 19th century guitars in general. We also were talking about the idea of building an instrument which would work well with low tension gut strings and playing without nails. And personally, I am really love the sound of this instrument. It has that Torres charm, which is one that is, I think there's a mellowness to it, but at the same time a clarity, which is the kind of the beautiful thing. It's a subtle sound that doesn't kind of punch, you know, it's not an abrasive sound, which maybe means it's not as popular as your modern, you know, sound, which really is about being a canon, you know. And what I love so much about these early guitars is that sweetness and that effect that they're just okay being, you know, what they are. They're not trying to be a Steinway piano or a trumpet or something. And in playing this instrument over the last few months, that's what I've been really enjoying as I've sort of acclimated to the touch of it, is what it gives you back is sort of this sweetness that's saying, hey, just kind of relax, you know, don't try to play something too overbearing. It's the guitar gives you back a lot of information that guides me in a way that really kind of adapts to my own taste. What about you? Are you happy with the results? Is it what you expected?
Well, hearing you just play it now makes me think it's opened up quite a bit since I've sent it to you as well. When I strung it up, I was fairly happy with it, though. From the get-go, the guitar had a ton of overtones, great clarity, decent volume. People always talk about opening up with guitars, and it does happen, especially with a spruce-top guitar, which needs a little while to realize it's no longer a treat. But a great guitar will sound great from the beginning, and a mediocre guitar won't. So people who say a bad guitar will open up to be great, not quite true. So I was happy to hear that wasn't in that category.
This is not in that category. It sounded better and better. And actually, I've played it now in 3 different ways. So I put gut strings on the second it arrived. So I've only really played it with gut strings. But when it arrived, I had some nails. And then I immediately, I didn't plan on doing this, but upon receiving the guitar, I decided, okay, let's see how it sounds without nails, since that was part of our goal. So I took the nails completely off, and for a little while I played without nails again, and loved the sound, especially on this instrument. That's when I decided to record a video of tremolo without nails for the first time, playing
fairly
Ricardo's
controversially.
Alhambra. What's that?
Fairly controversially.
Exactly, it's true. There was some controversy in some Facebook groups and things. To my surprise, people are pretty can be pretty aggressive about this idea of no nail playing and things. But I'm happy with the sound, and many other people were as well. Is there anything else about the sound that has surprised you?
Well, I'm just so used to building more modern guitars, which, as you said, focused on volume. And I build in the style of a French maker, Robert Boucher. So his goal was to gain clarity as well, good mids, polyphonic kind of guitars to sound like even and nice. But this guitar is like that, but even more so. It's not trying to be super loud. It doesn't really need to be. It's not, I don't think you're going to be playing like massive unamplified concert halls. But
I don't think the guitar should be playing massive unamplified concert halls. I don't think it was made to, historically.
I think Sigourney's going to haunt you now.
I'm okay with that. I'd tell him what I think if I saw him in person. I think this instrument was made historically for small rooms and for small audiences of a couple dozen people tops. So it has more in common with a lute than it does a Steinway piano. So I think that in the 20th century, people sort of forgot about this history of salon style music, and they started being envious of what was happening at the time, which was orchestras. Classical music was orchestra concerts and big piano concerts in massive concert halls. And of course, a Steinway piano can fill that hall. It's still an intimate sound relatively, but it's got a lot of bang, And I think guitarists had envy towards that, and they decided that if they couldn't do that, then they weren't quote unquote serious. But of course, when you take the guitar and you put it in this anachronistic environment, you get bad results. I mean, you get a bad sounding Steinway piano. Why is that thing so soft? So now it's a problem. As opposed to in the small room, it's perfect. It's ideal. So that's what I love about this, is you've made an instrument which is ideal for the setting in which it was intended. And I'm happy just kind of letting the guitar be what it is. Let it have its own nature and try to lean into that and let it be, as it wants to be.
Well, part of the reason why I've gravitated towards the style of instrument and why I was so happy to work with you as well, just my experience as an audience member, where I've been to plenty of shows in big auditoriums. The guitar is kind of faint, you're in the back row. It's not super great, but then when you go to like a small intimate show where there's maybe 20 people in a small room, I think that's really where the guitar shines. So that's kind of the niche I'm trying to fall into.
Let's talk about gut strings versus synthetic strings. So you had never put gut strings on a guitar before, is that right?
I had never installed them, no.
So what do you think about the sound now that you hear it with gut strings?
So I've played guitars with gut strings before, where my guitar teacher, when I was a kid, who you also know, Jason Prissett, he's also a lutenist and a theorbo player and romantic guitar player. So I've always known about gut strings. I've heard them for most of my life. I've even played them quite a bit, but I've never, on my own personal guitars, installed them. Mostly a cost issue where I wasn't really willing to spend $50 to $100 for strings.
Right.
I like them a lot. It's a very warm, intimate sound. I've also been a bit hesitant to really use them just because not exactly the most refined player, and I tend to be a little rough. I don't really want to rip up my high E string all the time.
That is the thing. There is some wear. In fact, since I let my nails grow back out, I've already been putting some wear on the first string. If some of you watching aren't aware, gut strings are sheep intestine strings, so the historical string that was used basically before 1940, all the way back in history. And I don't know if you can see on camera, but the top three strings, maybe you can see at the end here, have this sort of fleshy color, and are this is actual sheep intestine. And at the top here, you can even see I've curled up a bunch of it here because I want to save it and pull it down later as the string wears. So that's a gut string. It's a very different texture. It's got a bit of a friction to it, which helps with the no-nail playing, but also it's really good for left-hand stuff. Vibrato, to have a little bit of grip on the string, slides, slurs. I think it's a really cool thing to play the real deal historical string, and for me it totally changes the sound of the guitar. It makes the guitar respond in a different way. So there's one thing, there's the material, the gut versus the synthetic, but there's also the tension, so how taut the string is. I think you were telling me that you built this instrument to specifically be played at sort of the low tension approach, which is what works really well with no nails. What does that mean exactly? If you want to build a guitar that works very well with low tension, how does one do that?
Well, I've it's as simple as not building it very heavily. As I mentioned, the top is very thin, the sides are also thin, the back is quite thick. All of that is very much in keeping with the original Torres from 160 years ago. Obviously, the less mass you have on the top, the less drive force you need to drive the top. So if you have a thicker top meant for like high tension carbon strings, and you put gut strings on it, it might not sound so great.
Right.
And then vice versa, if you put high tension carbon strings on this, maybe you don't have a guitar tomorrow.
Exactly, they just explode. That's what I did notice. I fell in love with low tension strings, and I started experimenting 10 years ago with Nile Gut by Aguila, and in doing very low tension strings. And what I found was I recommended them to my colleagues, and they would put them on their guitars, which were clearly built for high tension carbon strings, and the guitar would just be dead. And I didn't understand what's happening. It sounds so great on my instrument. Ever since then, really, I've been addicted and in love with low tension strings for many reasons. You know, for playing without nails, it's absolutely necessary, I think. And even with nails, I play low tension because it makes for a beautiful vibrato as well as easy slurs. The higher the string tension, the more you sacrifice the slurs and the more you sacrifice the vibrato, which means most of what we do in 19th century music, beautiful vibrato, slides, legato, and all these slurs become useless. And suddenly you have to change all the music, and suddenly we're playing without slurs and every note sounds abrasive. So for me, it goes in the wrong direction. Another thing that I really like about playing low tension that I kind of do often is I just tune low. So right now, actually, if anyone's listening with perfect pitch, you might hear my E major chord, and it sounds like E flat major. I'm tuned to 415 hertz, so A is down a half step. We still call all the notes the same. You know, it's still E, A, D, G, B, E. It's just that pitch is relative, as it was historically. It's a modern phenomenon that we've standardized pitch. What about you, Brian? Now that I'm playing the instrument tuned down a half step at 415, I'm wondering, does that change how you hear the instrument? Do you recognize the sound still in the same way, or does it seem foreign?
Well, I do, mainly because I play at 415 as well.
I didn't know that.
I just find it a bit easier for myself to play guitar when the tension's a bit lower. Again, I'm not a particularly great guitarist. I play for fun, so I don't really care. But when I strung up the guitar originally, I had it at 415 too, so it sounds pretty much as I remember it, if not a bit more warm and open than when I first put strings on it.
Oh, that's great. So everyone out there, I really recommend trying to tune down 415 or even 392, which is a whole step down. So D and D on the outside. Sounds beautiful. The guitar sounds like a new instrument, very warm, very soft and subtle. How about we take a moment and listen to how this instrument sounds on a recording? So here is my performance of Recuerdos de la Alhambra, performed without nails, with gut strings and at 415. We'll just listen to a clip here. One thing you guys might have noticed is that I'm playing this classical guitar with a strap, which is not a mainstream thing today, but of course it was done in the 19th century and people have used straps throughout history, really. Brian, tell me about this beautiful end pin you added on the guitar.
Sure, so most commercial end pins are just a wooden pin fit with friction and a tapered hole. But as you mentioned, there have been some failures with that where you're playing and suddenly the guitar gives out. So we decided to go with the screwed-in one, which you might be more commonly familiar with on an electric guitar. I'm not a really big fan of the all-metal ones you'll find on a Les Paul, so I found this one where it's ebony with a gold screw that matches the tuning machine and other hardware.
So it's a normal guitar strap I found, and I picked gold because it matches the maple, the spruce, just kind of a lighter color. And then I just used this really simple D'Addario clip which goes onto the end of the strap, and I just tie it through the headstock there. And that can clip off if I want, or I can just undo the strap on the bottom. But I find it super comfortable, and I really recommend people give a strap a try. They'll try everything else before they try a strap. You know, they'll grab magnets and put magnets inside their guitar before they do the standard thing that every other guitarist does. You know, so there's nothing blasphemous about using a strap, guys. But I'm glad you were able to add such a beautiful end pin. It's a subtle touch, but I really like it.
Also, as I'm sure you're aware, Renaissance guitars and Baroque guitars were commonly fitted with end pins, where standard sitting position was with the strap. It's only until it's only the 19th century where we kind of lost that.
Totally. It's funny how modern people, when they don't take a look at the history, they only look at the last 50 years or so and basically Segovia forward. And Segovia for them is like the ancient, you know, godfather of the guitar who invented it or something. But in reality, he's playing it in one way, with nails on nylon strings, with a footstool. And today, I often hear that the traditional way of playing the guitar is like that, so nails and a footstool, where in fact, what tradition are we talking about? The pioneers who invented the techniques and were the first to play the 6-string classical guitar in the early 19th century, Sorg, Arkazi, Giuliani, Targa, these guys, or are we talking about someone, you know, 100 years after? So for me, I like to go all the way back, and this is totally valid and historical, just like no nails, just like gut strings. All of this comes together for me to create something beautiful. I feel kind of closer to the people at the time. Also,
Targa, I mean, Segovia actually did play with gut strings for more than half of his career, too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, nylon strings only came about during or a little after the World War by the Augustine String Company. Before that, everyone always played with gut strings. Segovia started his career in the turn of the 20th century. I think he got his first professional guitar in Granada in 1905. So it wasn't until like 1940-something that he started using nylon strings.
Good point. What's your plan, Brian? Are you going to keep going with some more 19th century style guitars? What's the future of your life as a luthier?
So even my modern inspired guitar is still fairly small in terms of the modern guitar pantheon. It's nearly identical in size to Torres' largest instrument from the later part of his life. So even my modern instruments are still heavily inspired by the 19th century instruments. I would love to continue making more Torres-inspired or Vicente Arias-inspired guitars. Going forward, I just try to make as many as I can, I guess.
Well, Brian, I'm super happy with the instrument, and I want to thank you for your excellent craftsmanship on it. How can my followers contact you if they want to, either if they're interested in a guitar themselves, or if they have questions about their guitars? What's the best way to reach out to you?
Sure. So I have an Instagram account. It's at Itzkin_guitars. My email address, brianitzkinguitars@gmail.com. And then my website is down for maintenance now, but hopefully should be up by the time you post this video. That's itzkinguitars.com. Also, give me a follow on Instagram.
Yeah, please do follow Brian on Instagram. He's posting really cool photos and little videos of himself in the building process in the shop. And I don't know about you, but if you're a guitar lover, seeing how these instruments are made and watching them only half built, and you know, for example, how is this Rosette, how this is made is actually incredibly intricate. And watching that process on Brian's Instagram has been really cool for me.
Mind-numbingly tedious.
I can't imagine, but the result is worth it, I hope.
I think so.
Brian, thank you so much for your time and for the love and attention you put into my beautiful new guitar.
Thanks for having me on, and I'm so glad to hear you like it.
I love it. All right, man. Take care.
You too.